geometry, we are looking at Unit 9, Day 4, Conditional Probability. So, just what is conditional probability? It's probability of, let's just write out the formula. It'd probably be easier if you can see what I'm talking about. It's the probability of B given A has already happened. So certain things happen, then when you take the probability of the second thing, it might change its probability. So they write it like this: probability of B slash A, and this slash sign means like say probability of B given that A has already occurred. So it looks like probability of A and B over divided by the probability of A. So the probability of these two things happening and divided by the probability that A has already happened. So I'm just going to write next to the probability of A is what we call given something has happened. So you divide by given this has already occurred. Okay, that's your bottom part. So let's look at this. Mitchell drew a card from a standard deck of playing cards. What's the probability he drew a queen given that the card was red? So we're going to start to look at, okay, well, the top would be and, so I'm going to put queen and red on top. And we're going to divide that by how many red there are. So how many red queens are there in a deck of cards? We have 2 red queens out of how many, this part it says given the card was red. So the bottom is your red, and there are 26 red cards in a deck. And we're just going to have you do decimals on this. If you want to reduce the fraction, it would be 1/13. But I think we're going to just round to 4 decimal places like we have recently. 2 divided by 26, we're going to say is 0.0769. A number from 1 to 100 is randomly selected. What's the probability that is a perfect square given that it is an odd number? Okay, so this is going to require a little bit more work on my part because I don't have all the perfect squares necessarily off the top of my head. So 1 is a perfect square, 4 is a perfect square, 9. I'm just going in my head, 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3. So 4 times 4 would be 16. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. 49. 8 times 8 is 64. 9 times 9 is 81. 10 times 10 is 100. So these are all my perfect squares I would list out. And then we want to see, given that it's an odd number. So the top would be, I'm going to put PS or perfect square and odd divided by the number of odd. Okay, so how many perfect square odd numbers do we have? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 5 perfect square odd numbers over how many odd numbers are there from 1 to 100? Well, half the numbers are even, half the numbers are odd, so we're going to say there are 50 odd numbers. So if you wanted to do fractions, I would reduce that to 1/10, but we have been just doing decimals, so 1/10 is 0.1. Alright, it is known that the probability of, I think I have 2 problems in the middle of this. Okay, it is known that the probability of someone signing up for yoga class is 0.65. Probability that the person signs up for a spinning class and a yoga class is 0.16. find the probability that a person with a gym membership will sign up for a spinning class if you know they are taking a yoga class. So the word if you know is the same thing as saying given this has happened. So up at the top here we have probably someone sign up. This is yoga only, and this is signs up for spinning and yoga. So the top number on this one will be 0.16 divided by given they're in yoga, and yoga was 0.65. And we'll just divide these. So instead of having fractions or counting, they give you a probability divided by another probability. And so that came out to about 0.2462. I will round 615. I rounded up to 62. Mr. Smith's math class. Probability of a student playing sports is 0.43. Probability that student plays sports and is in band is 0.10. So remember, given that you know student is in athletics, what's the probability they are also in band? So the top would be band and athletics, just to go back to what we did earlier, over given that the student is involved in athletics. And probably a mistake on our part, we called it sports and then we changed it to athletics, but we mean the same thing there. So 0.10 was to show they're in band and athletics, and then divided by sports or athletics was 0.43. 0.10 divided by 0.43 equals 0.2326. Again, we're running to two decimal places when we get done. So, going up here, conditional probability is the probability of the two events happening given that you already have had the first event happen. So you have to divide by that. Alright, independent and dependent. Independent means the first event does not affect the second event. I don't know why I put that D down there, sorry about that. Doesn't affect the second event. So they just say it's the probability of A times the probability of B. You just multiply the two probabilities together. Okay, they're independent of each other. Next one's called dependent. This one, the first event does affect the second event. So they show it as the probability of A times the probability of what we just did, B slash A, means probability of B given A has already happened. So you can kind of see how that relates to what we just did. On these, though, we're just wanting you to state whether you think the following events are independent or dependent, and you get to justify your answer, which means you get to have an opinion. And you're justifying the answer, you get to give me your opinion why you think it's one way or the other. You guys that like to argue, you get to argue here. Which way do you think this should go and why? Skipping school and having to recover credits. So, do you think that those two things would be dependent? If you skip school, do you think you would have to recover those credits? I personally said dependent. If this is something that happens often, I said skipping school can lead to failing grades, which would require you to recover the credit. dependent. My reason was skipping school can lead to failing grades and needing to recover credit. Wish I had made that box bigger. Sorry about that, guys. Alright, B. Being tall and being good at math. Okay, well, if you've ever met me, I'm a pretty short person and I'm pretty good at math. So I would say independent. I'm going to say height doesn't depend, I guess I should say that the other. Say good at math doesn't depend on being tall. Or height doesn't, how do we say it, affect math skills. Another way to say that would say that my being good at math isn't affected by being tall, in my opinion. Again, these are good to be your opinion. Being tall and being an NBA star. So, is being an NBA star dependent on being tall? That is, again, an opinion question. I would say most NBA players, though, are pretty tall. So I'm going to say probably dependent. I'll say most NBA players need to be tall. Again, if you can give me a good reason to why you think it's independent or dependent, this is your chance to argue that point. You just don't forget to explain, justify. Having blue eyes and being athletic. Are those two things dependent on each other? I'm going to say independent. And I'm going to say being athletic does not depend on your eye caliber. In my opinion, I don't think you have to have blue eyes to be good at